Right, and let's crack on. So, last week we did joining network healers. So we went through the document of joining network healers, and then we finished off with an exercise, a practical exercise on joining the network of healers with the brow chakra, the network of brow chakras, and then pouring energy into the tank, the virtual tank of healing energy, which is the first step in the energy healing process. So this week we are doing the second part of energy healing. So quite a few months ago we did lesson 1 of energy healing. We talked about, if you remember, we talked about what energy healing was. We talked about it in a bit of a biological sense, about how it evolved millions of years ago as a way of sharing healing between animals in a social group, and that evolved and evolved and evolved into what it is now today in humans. And we talked about hijacking those natural healing mechanisms in the body with conscious intent, i.e., forming an intention in the mind and creating healing energy from that, using the lower mind guna, which is a programming organ in the lower mind. So we talked about all that. If you remember, we did a self-healing, energy healing exercise in that lesson. We with gathering the energy in the solar plexus storage and then moving it to somewhere in the body, like a sprained wrist or a headache, and programming the energy and then sending that healing energy to the right place. So that's what we did in energy healing part 1. So today we're going to do energy healing part 2. We're going to learn about non-intention healing. And it's also a bit of a follow-on from last week as well, because we're going to talk about the virtual tank, applying non-intention healing to network healers, and talking about the tank. And we're going to do about 45 minutes to 50 minutes of theory, and then we're going to go straight into some practical exercises connected to the tank again. Right, and so let's start. So this is lesson 27. Can you believe we're on 27 lessons already? Lesson 27, Energy Healing Part 2, Non-Intention. So you'll hopefully recognize that screen from the last energy healing lesson, but this time it's Part 2, Non-Intention, because we talked about intention healing from the lower mind. Now we're going to talk about non-intention from the higher mind. So quick reminder, this slide is from the last lesson as well. The sharing of healing in a social group of animals. That's what energy healing really is. And it can be applied to oneself, and it can be applied to other people. Now, that happens subconsciously. The lower mind has evolved to do that subconsciously. But you can actually hijack that system and use it with conscious intent. That's what we learned in the last lesson. Forming the intention in the mind to program healing energy and using it either on yourself or sending it to somebody else to do a healing job. And that's what we learned in the last lesson. Now, the thing is, it can be used without conscious intent, of course. And the higher mind also evolved a healing capability. So alongside the lower mind, which was evolving these healing capabilities, the higher mind was also evolving a healing capability. Very different to the lower mind, but well, it has some similarities, but evolving on its own. The higher mind also needs a higher mind guna to program healing energy to take care of itself, basically. So higher mind healing has evolved alongside lower mind healing. And we're going to learn about that today. And we believe that this is the future of medicine, of course. The capabilities of higher mind healing and lower mind healing. Lower mind healing can do a lot, and higher mind healing can do even more. But the capabilities that are possible are far in excess of what our medicine can do, our mainstream medicine can do. So mainstream medicine is all about sort of forcing some sort of effect on the body, forcing some sort of healing on the body in some way by taking something usually. But higher mind healing and lower mind healing, or energy healing, is using the body's natural healing mechanisms that exist already. So it's already in sync with the body. It's just that we haven't yet unlocked in science, we haven't yet unlocked the actual power of that potential healing. So in the future, when all this becomes part of mainstream science and the true healing capabilities of the higher mind are known, for example, then that's where medicine is going to go. That's where science is going to go. It's going to try and figure all this out and use it and integrate it into medicine. But so back to the present moment, when we're using energy healing, it's all about understanding. It's all about the healer understanding what's going on. Or let's say it gets better and better or more efficient as the healer understands more. And that works with intention healing or non-intention healing. They're both very different, but with intention healing, it's all about the visualization in the mind of programming that energy. So the more detailed the programming, or more detailed the intention, the better the programming. But it also works for non-intention healing as well, for a reason that perhaps we're not necessarily uh, aware of yet. But the more the healer understands about the healing job, the better the higher mind healing as well. Go into that in a bit more detail later. So evidence is required, of course, for mainstream science, which is why we're starting our research project very soon. And Network Healers is a system of energy healing, primarily using higher mind healing. That's our goal, is to use higher mind healing. So just as a reminder, intention healing. This is when we're actually sitting down and forming the intention to send healing energy. And whether it's done in distance healing like this, sitting down, sending healing to somebody through visualizations, or whatever the intention is, it's just a thought process in the mind, isn't it? Because an intention is a thought process. So this is the lower mind, which gets activated by the thought process in the mind, which is another word for an intention. Whether you're doing it with your hands or whether you're doing it distance healing, intention healing is activated by lower mind thoughts, which is a complete contrast to non-intention healing. I think it's just all right. Morning, Sue. No worries. Good effort getting in. All right, then. So just a quick reminder, intention healing. This is when we are sitting and sending intention. Oh, but by the way, we're doing energy healing today, and it's part 2, and it's all about non-intention healing. That's what we're talking about. So intention healing is when we're sitting down and sending the healing. We're forming the intention in the mind to send that healing energy to somebody, whether we're using hands or just using sitting down and sending distance healing. Now, this is activated by lower mind thoughts because an intention is a thought process. Complete contrast to non-intention healing, because non-intention healing is not activated by the lower mind at all. Now, I know we've talked about this a fair amount now, so this is not news to you. But non-intention healing is activated by our higher mind, not by lower mind thoughts. And it can happen at any time. So you might not even be aware of it when it's happening. You might become aware of it. We'll talk about that a bit later on. But quite often it can happen at any time. You might just be making a cup of tea or going shopping or going for a walk or whatever it is. And higher mind healing can be going from you. So it's not activated by the lower mind. It's got nothing to do with the lower mind at all. It's your higher mind that decides to send that healing energy. So when we're using the word intention here, we really are linking it to conscious thoughts coming from the lower mind. That's what we mean by the word intention in this context. Now, there are 2 forms of non-intention healing, 2 types of non-intention healing. The first one is the subject of this lesson, higher mind healing. Now, this is the healing energy coming directly from your higher mind and coming out of you and going into somebody else. And it's programmed by the higher mind guna. Now, we talked about this in anatomy. quite a lot, didn't we? We talked about the lower mind anatomy, the higher mind anatomy, and both of them have got a guna, a lower mind guna and a higher mind guna. And the guna is a programming organ. That's what creates the healing energy or the magnetic enzymes. We're going to talk about magnetic enzymes a bit in this lesson as well. So that's one type, higher mind healing. And that's the type that Network Healers is primarily going to use. There is another type of non-intention healing, and that is Maya healing. Now, I'm not going to talk much about it here because we've got another lesson, a third part of energy healing coming up later, and we'll talk about Maya healing in that lesson. Otherwise, it's just a bit of a can of worms. But the only thing I will say is that higher mind healing comes from a higher mind, whereas Maya healing is after Kundalini awakening and self-realization. It starts to come from the Akashic stream, the ninth chakra. But it's a can of worms, so we'll put that on the shelf and we'll talk about that later on. So this lesson, we're going to be talking about higher mind healing. So the difference between higher mind healing and lower mind healing really comes down to programming. Levels of programming. So imagine that these little lines here are layers of programming on healing energy, on magnetic enzymes. But really, just think of it as healing energy has layers of programming attached to a magnetic field. That's what it really is. And in this example, we could say that the base layer, the big thick red layer, that's a base layer, and that's red. That's using the frequency of red energy, because different frequencies or different colors can be used for different jobs. And we'll be talking about that a lot in the Book of Codes lesson. Now, the lower mind is perfectly capable of separating out frequencies and then adding some layers of programming. And in fact, there are systems of healing out there that use color healing. So that's a thing already out there. Now, the lower mind's perfectly capable of doing that. So intention healing can separate out the frequency and add layers of programming on. And for example, the lower mind is perfectly capable, or let's say intention healing is perfectly capable of deconstructing a tumor, for example. A certain base layer frequency will be chosen, then a few layers of programming on top of that. And it's perfectly possible to remove a tumor. However, the problem occurs with frequency of use. With lower mind healing, it's got to be constant. It's got to be repetitive. And that doesn't happen very often, does it? You know, when somebody goes to a healer, generally speaking, maybe they'll go every couple of weeks or something like that. And then on top of that, they might have to pay for it. If it's 50 quid a session or something like that, people can't afford a really repetitive session. But, you know, if somebody went back and did it 3 or 4 times a day, then they'd see very good results with lower mind healing in removing a tumor. So it's all about consistency, really, with lower mind. It's got to be really repeated a lot. However, higher mind can add on all sorts of layers of frequency on top of that, which adds speed. It can add efficiency to the healing, and it can start doing things that the lower mind cannot do. For example, the higher mind is capable of modifying DNA strands. So it can actually go into a DNA code and heal or replace some of the code for another piece of code. So if somebody has genetic mutations which causes genetic diseases, for example, the higher mind can actually change that DNA. So it can do a lot more than the lower mind can actually do. So it's all about levels of programming, the difference. Now, the next thing to talk about is hybridization. So this is a tricky thing to think about, and it's a tricky thing to explain, to be honest. So basically, what hybridization is, and I have talked about this a bit before, and what it is that imagine a soul going on a journey of spiritual evolution. Now, at some point in its early human spiritual evolution, it's going to be a sleeping soul, isn't it? It's going to be a sleeping higher mind, not yet become aware of its own reincarnation. And at that point, that higher mind won't be sending any higher mind healing out of its body at all, because it doesn't even know that there are other people around it, really. But then when it becomes awake or aware of its own reincarnation, and it evolves spiritually. It starts making life plans. It starts forming soul families, etc. Uh, very gradually, and I talked about this in the last anatomy lesson, if you remember. Very gradually, the circulation system of the higher mind and the lower mind start coming together. This happens very gradually over, many, 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 many incarnations. So at the start, there may be a little joining of the two circulation systems. Now, do you remember in the anatomy lesson, I showed you where it was happening at the chakras, where the lower mind circulation system grows over the chakra during an incarnation, not allowing any higher mind energy to get out of the person. And then very gradually, as a person evolves spiritually, higher mind circulation system just starts to creep in, starts to blend with the lower mind one. At that point, some higher mind healing energy can get from the higher mind circulation system into the lower mind circulation system and then out of the person. So basically what we're saying is that as a soul evolves spiritually, it is more and more able for higher mind healing energy to come out. So at the start, it may be, say, 1%. 1% higher mind healing energy versus 99% lower mind healing energy. But as that person evolves, then that percentage will grow. And then maybe you get to when somebody starts approaching self-realization, it will be, maybe 50% or something like that, 50-50 or maybe something like that. And then as you go through self-realization, then it expands to 100%, 100% higher mind healing. And to be honest, as you go through self-realization, because of the hybridization process of the lower mind and the higher mind, lower mind actually disappears. So it becomes always 100%. There is no more lower mind healing when you get to a certain point. So you might think to yourself, well, if I'm giving healing to somebody, if I'm forming the intention to give healing to somebody with hands or through distance healing, you might think, is intention healing coming out or is non-intention healing coming out? Well, that's down to your higher mind, because if you're forming the intention to, now this can get a little bit tricky to think about sometimes, but if you're forming the intention to send healing, then the lower mind is always going to be sending healing. But the higher mind can choose itself. It's got its own process. It can send healing energy or it doesn't. So it's completely up to your higher mind whether it sends healing energy in. So the next question you might ask yourself is, well, why would the higher mind not send healing energy? In what world would the higher mind not want to help somebody else, you might think? Well, there's a very good reason why it doesn't happen all the time. Otherwise, whenever somebody gets to a certain point in spiritual evolution, the higher mind is just going to be healing everyone around it. But that doesn't happen. We don't see that, do we? And there's a very good reason why. And this little bugger here, it's ego. So the problem is, before self-realization, there's always an identity, a lower mind identity, which is the ego or the egoic identity or the false self. Now, the problem is that healing success like that will make the identity grow. The ego turns success into an identity and the ego grows and grows. So higher minds will tend to restrict what healing is coming out of them because of that, because a well-developed higher mind is never going to allow its ego to get too big, because it restricts it in its own spiritual evolution. But once you go through self-realization, that is no longer a problem, because in the Kundalini phase, as you're aware, in the Kundalini phase, the egoic identity shatters into pieces. And once you're past that Kundalini phase, it can't come back again. And the mechanism has disappeared. So you might also ask, does that mean that everybody that becomes self-realized now or in the past turns into a healer and starts healing everybody around them? Well, no, it doesn't. That doesn't necessarily happen either, because it depends on purpose. It depends on somebody's higher purpose that they get through. It depends on their role. What are they going to be doing as a self-realized person? And that's down to the infinite plan of the source. But as we're going through global awakening, very soon, or it's just sort of emerging now, you will find that more and more people become self-realized and more people will start to become healers because it's the right time. You know, people that have become self-realized in the past, quite often they haven't necessarily become healers. They've just become teachers because it hasn't been the right time yet for healers to appear. But the global awakening is really when that really explodes, and getting it part of, integrating it into mainstream medicine is a big part of that. Okay, any questions about that before I move on? So how do we apply higher mind healing to network healers? Because network healers is a network of healers that are going through self-realization. And by the way, that's not really a choice that we've made. That's not something that we've designed in any way. It's just happening that way. It seems like that's the plan. Everybody that joins network healers has had a Kundalini awakening and is going through either the Kundalini phase or self-realization. It's just that's the way it's working out. So obviously that's the plan. So that's why in network healers we are trying to harness the energy of higher mind healing. So first of all, a couple of things to mention about the application, and that is, first of all, and we talked about this last week, we don't sit down to send healing energy to people, because that's an intention healing way of doing it. So we don't need to use our hands, and we don't need to sit down and send the intention to people. However, there's nothing wrong with sitting down and sending energy to people. So sometimes that carries on. And hands healing sometimes will carry on. So it doesn't mean that we require ourselves not to do that. It's just that there is no requirement to. We don't need to sit down. And that really does help with organizing schedules. So the healing partner will sit down at a particular time and accept the healing energy, because the healing partner needs to do the self-healing techniques. In clinic, that is. In health flow, they don't need to sit down to do anything. The energy just goes to them all the time. But the healer does not. Now, it can be tricky moving from intention to non-intention if you are a practicing healer already. It's tricky sometimes because you get into a habit of doing it. So you think that you have to do it. So moving from intention to non-intention can be a bit of a learning process, because you kind of feel like you're not doing it, or you feel like you're not doing anything. It goes along with the journey of trust, actually, the trust in your higher mind, that your higher mind is doing the job. So that can be a bit of a process if you are already a practicing. Okay, the next 3 points are the points that we're going to go through next in this lesson. Virtual tank, magnetic enzymes, and visions from higher mind. These are the main 3 areas where we apply non-intention healing to network healers. Virtual tank, magnetic enzymes, and visions from higher mind, because we do use visions. So let's go through these now, and then we'll do some practical exercises. So first of all, virtual tank. Now, we did the virtual tank exercise last week, didn't we? And many of you saw it however you were designed to see it. It's down to your higher mind how you see it, really. But this is an example. This is how I see it, that's all. But this is just an example of how you can see it. And it's up to your higher mind what vision it gives you. So this is how we work in network healers, just to remind everybody. This is how we work in network healers with sending energy. The virtual tank is a tank of energy in the collective mind. It is a real place. So it is an actual storage of energy in the collective mind. So that energy has got to get from the healers to the recipient. And this is what we're talking about. These are the stages that we're going to use to get from the healer to the recipient. So this is actual healing energy that we're talking about, and it's got form, and it's in a place, and it goes across the collective mind. I don't know where this virtual tank is, by the way, geographically. Maybe that's a discussion to be had at some point. So the first stage is filling up the tank with golden healing energy. Now, this part, stage 1, can be intention or non-intention healing. This is why we've got these stages in, because this means we can use lower mind healing and higher mind healing for this part. And the reason is because when people are joining network healers, there still tends to be a percentage of lower mind and higher mind. And it also gives us the capability in the future of getting other people to send their healing energy to the tank. We could get, in the future, we could get hundreds or even thousands of people sending their healing energy to the virtual tank, and we could utilize that energy in energy healing. So that gives us that capability, basically. So that's the first stage. Fill up the tank with golden healing energy. Now, the second stage. Now, this is just the way I see it, but you may be given something completely different. I see a tap coming off the tank, and I see lots of streams of energy going off to various different recipients. So this is the second stage. This is from the tank to the recipient. And each one of those streams corresponds to a different recipient. And you can actually zoom in into the stream and see all the different constituents of the healing. Now, this is going to be part of one of the visions we're going to be trying later on in this lesson. So we're going to come back to this screen. And this stage can only be done by higher minds. So this is where we're utilizing the higher levels of programming that can be done by the higher mind. So it's done by the network, all our higher minds together, but they take the golden energy, the golden healing energy. It's already got a layer of programming on it to make it golden healing energy. But then it gets separated out into the frequencies and all sorts of layers of programming attached to it, and it gets sent to the recipients. So that's the virtual tank concept, which is your first application, really. The second application is magnetic enzymes, or MEs. So what we do is we write in network healers, we write down the instructions for the healing energy in the structuring the healing journey form, which you guys filled out a couple of lessons ago. So let me just remind you about magnetic enzymes again. So this bit was in the first lesson. So a magnetic enzyme is healing energy. That's what healing energy actually is. If you really zoom into it and look, you'll find long strips of magnetic fields with programming attached to them. That's what healing energy is. And in this case, it's the higher mind that's programming these magnetic strips, the higher mind guna. Now, if you zoom right into these magnetic enzymes, you will see stuff. And what you'll see is they got two sides. They got one side called the rough side. Now, the rough side is a side where it's got lots of lots of protruding patterns coming out of it. And these patterns or these shapes are designed to latch onto something, latch onto molecules. Now, in biology, there is a concept, the concept of enzymes already exists. And an enzyme is a facilitator of a reaction, a chemical reaction. That's what an enzyme is, the definition. And there is a concept in biology called the lock and key method. The lock and key method is how a biological enzyme latches on to other molecules. And the lock and key method is two shapes of molecules that are designed to fit together like a lock and key. Now, magnetic enzymes works a little bit like that. So the rough side has got this one side of the lock and key, and then it attaches onto wherever it needs to attach to. And that's how it can have an effect on the material body. And there's another side. The other side is called the smooth side. The smooth side is where the programming is. This is where the instructions are laid down. Another word for that is an algorithm. But it's just really a set of instructions for that magnetic enzyme, telling it what to do, where to go, and what to do. That's all on the smooth side. Layers and layers of programming. That diagram that we looked at before with the layers of colors, the layers of programming, that's on the smooth side. Okay, and there are 4 types of magnetic enzymes that we are concerned with today. I think there are probably hundreds of types, actually. But that's going to be for the future. There's 4 types that are really important for us at the moment to understand. Okay, so there are 4 four types of MEs that we are concerned with: regulatory, constructing, deconstructing, and modifying. Now let's go through each of these and give an example. And let's relate it to how we're applying this to network healers. And think about that form that you filled out, the Structuring the Healing Journey form. Okay, regulatory MEs. So a regulatory magnetic enzyme is something that goes and does regulation somewhere in the body, and switching genes on and off is part of that job. So this is an example of something that we can write into the Structuring the Healing Journey form. And all you have to do is give a short and precise instruction for that magnetic enzyme. So you can write in your form something like, send regulatory MEs to switch on genes in nuclear DNA that activate cell division. Now, this example here is if we want to try and build tissues. Let's say wound repair, something like that. We want to build up the tissues. That can be implied in all sorts of healing, can't it? But you have to actually get cells to divide. Cells have to grow and the tissue has to grow. And first of all, you have to switch on the genes that activate cell division. Now, you can go even further than this and talk about stem cells as well, but that's, not necessarily relevant for today. So this kind of statement is what that you would put in your Structuring the Healing Journey form in the section Energy Healing. And as part of this same example, you would also use constructing MEs, because the cells are going to start dividing. You've activated that. And then you want to send MEs to go and help build the cell contents quicker, because constructive MEs go and build things. That's what they do. So you might put this sentence in your form: send constructive MEs to help build the cells quicker. Oh, so that's still quite a general statement, isn't it? But it's a good level of understanding for the healer, because it shows that the healer is understanding roughly what those MEs are actually doing. And we probably don't need to go further than that. I mean, you could go so far into knowing what happens, all the way down to a molecular level. But, there's a line where we want to find a balance, really. Okay, and another example. And apologies for the picture, it's not very pleasant. But that's a tumor. That's a tumor in lung tissue. And deconstructing MEs are good at going to deconstruct things, to break things apart, destroy cells. So if the healing energy needs to go and destroy a tumor somewhere, then you could put this in, for example: send deconstructive MEs to remove and destroy the cells of the tumor. So deconstructive magnetic enzymes can go and deconstruct. And by the way, we're talking about higher mind healing here, and the way we do that is by putting that in the form. The way we apply that is by putting it in the form, putting it in the Structuring the Healing Journey form. That's the way we apply it in higher mind healing, because that's all we need to do. But if someone was using intention healing, then they could actually use this phrase as a mantra, because this would actually program the healing energy. And deconstructing MEs is perfectly capable, is a part of lower mind healing. So, as I mentioned earlier, so somebody could repeat that phrase and have the same effect, but they'd have to do it while they're sending the healing energy. Whereas in high mind healing, we can just write that down in the form and trust that our high minds are going to do the rest. Okay, and lastly, modifying MEs. So magnetic enzymes can go and modify things. That means going to make changes in something and not destroying it, basically. An example here, as I mentioned before, is changing the DNA code in DNA. If somebody's got mutations in the DNA, which is causing a genetic disease. And a good example here is my mother with mitochondrial disease. So the phrase could be sending modifying MEs to locate errors in the DNA code and replace/heal them. Simple as that. And this might all seem quite technical. However, the more you do it, the easier it gets, because these phrases tend to be very similar. The more cases you do, it's just a case of doing the same thing every time. And when new medical cases come in, you kind of just adapt it to the new medical case, things tend to become very similar very quickly. So you will get, the first time you try and fill out a form with these, it might be a little bit bewildering, but that's okay. That's normal. Every time you do it, it just gets easier and easier. Okay, and the last application, there was the virtual tank, there was magnetic enzymes, and now it's visions. So let's talk about visions and how we use visions as part of network healers. First of all, what's the difference between a visualization and a vision? Now, we have talked a bit about this before, but to remind you, a visualization is when the lower mind tries to see something, tries to imagine something, tries to visualize something. That's a visualization. A vision is when the higher mind sends in something that you see and you have no control over it. So a visualization comes from the lower mind, a vision comes from your higher mind. Eventually, just as an aside here, eventually, as you go through self-realization, there is no more visualization, is there? Because there is no more lower mind. So eventually, as you go through self-realization, it's all visions. Everything that you see is visions. Very important to remember that and to trust that as well. Because it's, moving from intention to non-intention, there's always that, you go through this journey of self-doubt as well, don't you? And it's very easy to say, oh, am I just making that up? Or is the lower mind just making that up? That's a very common phrase, isn't it? So it goes along with the journey of trust as well. And that goes along with the journey of surrender. It's all linked. It's all linked. The journey of self-realization is all linked into this. Okay, so the visions that we use as part of high mind healing, we are calling Vinaya visions. But here's some examples of some of the visions inside the book. And we don't need to go through the details of them now, but just to show you what kind of visions you can get. And, they're quite technical visions, aren't they? And one thing to mention here actually is when you were seeing the one on the right there, when you were seeing a tiny little bit of golden energy filling up like a little tiny corner of the lung. Do you remember that? Yeah, yeah. So she was used to having a heavy weight in her lungs all the way through her life. She's never felt what it's like not to have her lungs feel like they're full of lead, basically. And she, as these visions were progressing, and there was no contact between, we made sure of that. But as they were progressing, she would describe it as if her lung was not there. There's a little piece down at the end here. It's just not there. She couldn't feel it. In other words, and that kept progressing up her lung, basically. So when she was saying the lung's not there, I finally figured out that that was just a normal a normal lung. So we can't feel our lungs, can we? so so she would always feel them. So she was actually feeling that as the visions were unfolding. So it's a great tool. And here's another example. It's a great tool for our higher minds to tell us what's happening in the healing process. And we're going to be using this going forward in every healing hub. And as you can see, these visions are, they're pretty complex. They're fairly technical and they're pretty complex. We still haven't at the time we didn't really know what they meant, to be honest with you. We were trying to figure it out as we were going on. We know a lot more now, but there's still some parts of them we haven't figured out yet. So it's an ongoing process. So we want to bring this into network, the fast track course. We want to develop this in healers in the network. So in the healing hub, maybe there'll be one or more people that start giving these visions in, and it gives progress. It shows the progress that the healing is actually making. Okay, we're going to do some practical next. So shall we stop for a break quickly before we do that? Excellent. I will see you in a couple of minutes. All right, shall I carry on? So on the screen now are the practical exercises we're going to do today. So we're going to just start with some golden energy yogic breathing, because last week we did basic yogic breathing. But this time we'll just advance it on to golden energy yogic breathing. And that's just going to activate our energy bodies, give the energy bodies a boost, ready for the exercise. Then we're going to do virtual tank stage 1. And that's the same exercise we did last week. And then we're going to move on and do virtual tank stage 2. And that's from the tank to the recipient. But it starts with the virtual tank stage 1. You move through that very quickly, and then you start to see the second stage. And then we're going to do the Vinaya Visions exercise. So I'll explain that when we get. So first of all, let's do golden energy yogic breathing. So let me just remind you very quickly about the basic yogic breathing rhythm, and then I'll talk about the visualization that goes on top of it. So basic yogic breathing, deep breathing rhythm. On the in-breath, belly comes out, chest comes out, and then you feel right up to the top, 100% full of air. And then you hold your breath, count for 2 or 3 or something like that. And then all the way out, nice, long, slow, steady stream, all the way out to the bottom of the breath, no more air in your lungs at all. And then you hold your breath again for another count of 2 or 3. So it's in for the count of 4 or 5, something like that. Doesn't have to be accurate, don't worry. Hold for 2 or 3, and then out for 4 or 5, and then hold for 2 or 3. That's the breathing rhythm and technique. Now, we did that last week. So the golden energy bit is adding a visualization on top of it. So with the visualization on the in-breath, you want to visualize. Now I'm using the word visualize, but if you do get a vision instead, that's perfectly all right, because that'll just be your higher mind taking over and giving you a vision. So you want to visualize golden energy pouring in from all directions and filling your whole energy body up with golden energy on the in-breath. So then your whole golden energy is full of bright, clear, clean, golden energy. Now, on the breath hold at the top, you want to visualize that golden energy exploding out in all directions, like you're an exploding sun or an exploding star. And then when the air is coming out on the out breath, you want to keep that golden energy in. You don't want to breathe it out. In the visualizations, don't breathe it out. So your breath is coming down, but your visualization of that golden energy is holding that bright, clean, clear golden energy in your energy body. All right, let's give that a go for a few minutes. So nice vertical spine, better with your eyes closed. Use your nose if you can. And I'll let you know when to stop. Do? Lovely. So before we carry on, anyone got any questions or comments about that? You can see it wherever you want, basically. But generally speaking, when we teach this, we tell people that to see it pouring in from all directions. But if somebody wants to see it pouring in as a liquid through their throat, that's all right, or breathing it in through their nose and filling up, that's okay, or whatever goes. I think really it's the intention that matters with this particular exercise. With you guys, however, I mean it's slightly different because some of you may have got to the stage where you're not actually pulling in golden energy from your chakras, and it might all be coming down from the ninth chakra, but that's probably an added complication that we don't really need right now, but it might explain some visions if you get. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's another added complication. Maybe we'll put it on the shelf for a minute. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So moving on then, let's go on to the virtual tank stage 1. So this is the same exercise that we did last week, basically. So just to remind everyone quickly, you want to be visualizing a tank of energy, or, if you're given a vision of something else, that's perfectly fine. Go with whatever vision you're given. So this is just an example. It's just a suggestion. And all the healers sat round this tank. And the first step is to actually connect brow chakras with all the other healers. So imagine a brow chakra cord going from your brow to every single other healer in the group. So there's loads of different chakra cords coming from your brow chakra. Now, don't worry about trying to visualize the people in this group, and don't worry about how many people there are. It doesn't matter. Just imagine that there are healers, and they are network healers, and they're all sat around the tank, okay? And you've got brow chakra connections to all of them. That's the first stage. The second stage is then start to see golden energy pouring into the tank from your brow chakra and from everybody else's brow chakra. So we separated this out into 2 exercises last week. This time we're just going to put it together in one exercise. and we can start shortening up these exercises because we're progressing on to another exercise. Okay, so uh, do that, and we'll do that for about 5 minutes, okay? And just so you know, the Vinaya exercise at the end is probably going to be about 10 minutes. So go for it. I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, that'll do. Let's start coming back now. Okay, so hopefully that was similar to last week. By the way, if you do struggle to see much, then that's okay. It's just can take a bit of practice to tease these visions out of your higher mind sometimes. Any comments or questions? Yeah. Well, that might very well be how it actually happens. That might be a message from your higher mind telling you that that's what's actually going on. Well, do you mean that you're not seeing the brow chakra chords? Yeah, but that's okay. You're just not being shown that bit. I mean, probably because you don't need to be shown that anymore because it's become so solid. Because the more that you are in a network healers hub in network healers, the more solid that brow chakra connection becomes. That's why we do that visualization exercise, is to form those brow chakras connections, and then we don't cut those cords, and then we leave it. And the longer a chakra cord is in place, the more solid it gets. So you're not being shown that part because you don't need to be shown. You're being shown something else that you need to know. Rightio. Okay. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. So the next part is virtual tank stage 2. So for this visualization, or vision, I should say, you want to race through what you've just done and then move on to part 2. So it's good to always start with the first part and then go on to stage 2. So, you know, see the brow chakras in place, move on quite quickly to pouring the golden energy into the tank. And then once you're happy, once the tank's full, perhaps, once the tank's got full, then start to see the stage 2, the tank to the recipient. And just wait to see what you're shown and how you see it. But as an example, you can use this tap and the different streams of energy going to the recipients. Okay, any questions before we give that a go? A good point, and I was going to explain that in the next one, but we are going to use in the next exercise, we're going to use a fictional case of asthma in the same way that we did for the structuring the healing journey form. Or, but for this one, you can maybe not worry about that too much at all and just focus on the different streams going out to lots of different recipients. So for this exercise, just imagine that it's okay. You're in network healers and you're just seeing lots of different streams to lots of different recipients. Don't go to the recipient yet because that's part of the next exercise. But, if you're shown something, you're shown something. You have no control over it anyway. All right, excellent. Okay, so yeah, give that a go. I'll let you know when to stop. Okay, I think that'll do. Come back now. Okay, how was that for people? Any comments? Well, I guess it depends. Yes, so it depends. So it depends how you were seeing it exactly, and what part of the process were you actually seeing there? So it definitely streams from the healer to the tank, and then it definitely streams from the tank to the recipient. So were you seeing? So you were seeing the recipient, and then the stream was just what going through them and out the back or something. Okay, that makes sense. So I guess what you could infer from that is that when healing energy goes to a person, it's got a carrier system of golden energy. Because as we know already, golden energy is a carrier system for pretty much everything that flies around in vessels in energy. So when healing energy goes to a person, it needs to first of all get into their energy body. And there's certain ways of getting in through the crown chakra is the best way. However, there may be, but you may want to use another chakra. There may be blockages. You may need to add a primer to unblock the blockages. Anyway, the healing energy has got to get into that person. But the carrier energy, golden energy, is not used up. It's not part of the healing energy. So that's got to go somewhere. So that will have to actually get grounded out of the feet of that person. So perhaps you're seeing the flow, the healing energy as a big flow with the carrier of golden energy go into the person and almost like be flowing through them and out the other end, and then grounding into the earth through their feet chakras. Maybe that's what you're seeing, right? Well, yeah. Yeah, well, that is right. Metaphorically speaking, that is right. It's going into the earth energies, which is like a sea of golden energy, you could say. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. So, yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Right. Okay, that's very interesting. I don't know what that refers to, but you can see that our higher minds are switching on and giving us information. Every vision so far has been given, it's giving some information. So I don't know. That sounds like new learning to me. So whether it's got something to do with the distance that somebody is, perhaps, or whatever it is that our high mind is, your high mind is trying to tell us, basically. So that's great. That's what we want. We want to start writing, drawing this stuff down, which leads us on to the next exercise. This is the Vinaya Visions exercise. So it builds on what we've done before, and this is the standard exercise that is going to be that we're going to give to network healers. And this is the assignment for this lesson as well, to go away and do this a few times. Now, remember, this can be done at any time. This is not intention healing. Just want to make that clear. This is not sitting down at a particular time to send healing energy to somebody. This is completely different. This is just a vision from our higher mind, and this can be done at any time for any length of time. It's not connected to the actual healing that's moving. It's your higher mind giving you information about what's happening. Yeah, so you don't have to get a vision. That's the main thing here. You don't have to get a vision. You can not do this exercise, and it doesn't matter at all. Your higher mind healing will be taking place whatever happens. But we are using this vision exercise as a way of writing down what's actually happening during the healing process. So it's not connected to you actually giving healing at all. Does that make sense? So it's an yeah, yeah. So it's not it's not activating any healing. It's the other way around. Your higher mind is telling you this is what's happening with this recipient, but it's not linked to activating any healing. That is being done by your higher mind separately. This is purely so that we can start writing down some visions and learning more, basically. Like 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 the visions that have just come through there are telling us. Each one is telling us something. That's what these visions are for. Yeah, yeah. It's not activating any healing. So every time you read this and you see those words can be done at any time, that's a reminder of that. It's not linked to, you don't sit down and send healing this way. It's a completely separate application. Yeah, it's a bit confusing though. Okay, so they can be done at any time, at any place. And, when you get used to it, it's always there. So you can go back to it. So you got 3 minutes spare sometimes. You can just close your eyes and it's there and you can see it. You might get something else. Right then, so we're going to do this in a sec. So step one is what we've done before. Virtual tank of golden energy. You can fly through. Once you get used to these visions, you can fly through that. And by the way, that includes the brow chakra one as well. But once the brow chakras are done, you can kind of skip the step, move on to the golden energies, and then you go on to step two, the high mind healing, going to the recipients, like we've just done. Now the next bit is different. So step three, you want to determine which recipient's healing energy you are seeing. That's the first step. Zoom in to the tap area, or however you see it, and separate out all the different streams of energy going to different people. Choose one, pick one, and determine who it is. Now, in this example, we're just going to use a fictional case study of severe asthma, like we did in the last example. And I hope that our higher minds will play along. So you just, but when you're doing it for real, you just determine where, or your intuition tells you where that particular stream is going, so you know which recipient you're talking about. So you zoom into that stream that's coming out of the tank first of all, and note down or note in your mind which colors you're actually seeing. Colors is very important because it's that base layer of programming. What frequency of energy is the base layer? Step 5 is then trace where it's going and go to the recipient. So look where the energy is going and what it's doing. Now, there's quite a lot in that statement. Follow that stream and go to the recipient. And in this case, it's severe asthma. And then allow your higher mind to show you what is happening, where the energy is going, and what it's doing. Now, if you think back to the Vinaya Visions example I showed you, it can be, it's completely up to your higher mind what you see. Maybe you'll see energy going in. Maybe you'll see doing some strange things. Maybe you'll see a picture of some lungs. Maybe you'll go deep into the lungs and see the alveoli, and maybe you'll see, who knows what you'll see. It can get quite technical. But then afterwards, you want to write down the colors, and you want to, if you can, draw the vision of healing doing its job in the body. So we've got some sort of record of what you've seen. Okay, any questions about that? Okay, we'll do this one for a bit longer because it's a bit more involved, isn't it? And you can go through the first steps, as quickly or as slowly as you want. And also, don't forget that the screen is up on here. So if you forget what you're doing, you can always open your eyes again and and remind yourself of the steps. Okay. Let's give that a go then. I will let you know when to stop. Be about 10 minutes this time. Okay, now let's start coming back now. Hopefully everyone's still awake. We haven't lost anybody. What you might find is, we'll get some comments in a minute, but what you might find is that every time that you do this exercise, as part of this assignment, you might go back to the same vision. It's quite possible that your higher mind takes you back to that same vision and gives you a little bit more each time. So that would be interesting if that happens. Any comments then? Who's going to start? Yeah. Well, so let me go into that because first of all, this is part of the journey of trust, where you will gradually let go of the idea of making something up. Now, let me show you something. Let me give you an example of what how some of these visions can appear, because I've got this lovely friend called SpongeBob, and your high mind can communicate in various different ways. And in case our higher mind comes across as SpongeBob, all the way through the healing process, it's been SpongeBob. At the start, I was constantly saying, "I'm just making this up. This is crazy. I'm just making this up. This is silly." But now I think you realize, don't you, that it's not you making it up. It is your higher mind through various different ways. That was SpongeBob telling us that it was on a bit of a plateau and she had to wait. She had to wait, and that was SpongeBob hugging Big Ben, which is a symbol of time. So these visions can come in all sorts of ways, and quite often they can be humorous as well. And absolutely, it sounded really very pleasant. Yes, that's true. The alveoli are like little trees. Absolutely right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the metaphor of tree obviously fits perfectly with the alveoli. Yeah, excellent. Well, and also just to remind you that as you go through Kundalini awakening, once you go past the Kundalini phase and you go into the phase of self-realization, your higher mind takes control of everything from that point onwards. So the lower mind gradually disappears through, after years, after 7 years, but it gradually disappears in the negative cycle. But from that point onwards, your higher mind controls everything. So your higher mind has full control over whatever you see. So the journey of trust has to start right, as soon as somebody goes through the end of the Kundalini phase, because their high mind takes complete control. Well, that's great. No, that's great, because that's just because you're already in a hub. So that's okay. Yeah, excellent. And it also shows that your high mind's in control of this. Is that in your vision or in your real material? Okay. Excellent. Well, maybe we're going to be getting a dog soon onto the healing list. Excellent. Okay. Well, maybe you want to build on that. Maybe you want to draw that again. Maybe that's like one of the final visions for this book. Maybe, who knows? But it does lead me to say something here, that when we're having these visions, these high mind visions, when we see colors, we have to determine one of two things, because you can be seeing the frequency of the base color for that healing energy, and that's very useful because if red energy is good for building tissues, for example, if somebody's got a wound and and you can see red energy going to it, then you know that red energy is good for that, and different colored energies are good for different things. So it's very useful to see what color it is. However, sometimes you see colors in another purpose as well, in a metaphorical way. Sometimes the colors can mean something, can be referring to something else, which you've got to interpret in some way. So that's always good to bear in mind. You might not always be seeing the actual frequency, but I would suggest that if you're zooming into the flow, that's the stream that's going to that recipient, and you zoom in and you see all the different strands of colors. I would suggest that at that point you would be seeing frequencies. Yeah, excellent. So this is a good point. So I might alter the assignment just a little bit and add that in and say, whatever color you're seeing, try and work out whether you're seeing frequencies, whether you're seeing metaphors, and try and interpret what the meaning actually is. And that can be part of the exercise because visions are useless without an interpretation, of course. All right, there we go. I think we've gone past 12, so I guess we should call it a day. Excellent stuff. We had some good responses from everybody's higher minds, getting engaged, getting involved. And we now know where our healing tank of energy is located in Glastonbury, and that makes sense because Glastonbury is like is probably the best place in the UK that's got the most connections in the collective mind to all other places. Maybe when it goes even further global, maybe it'll get moved. Maybe we'll move the tank to somewhere else in the world where it's got the most connections to the whole world. One thing at a time, though. Yeah. Excellent. All right, should we call it a day? All right. See you guys next week. Bye-bye.